Right. Okay, so this is the bottom of the Akai deck. So this is the business end. This is where all most of the interesting things is happening here. Power transformer, pots used for recording, which I'm never going to do. At least I don't think so. So I'm not even going to bother. A lot of times you would hit these up with a little bit of tuner cleaner to get the scratchiness out of the pots. They almost always need that. Um, you can get it at different places. If you look at this stuff, there it is right there. Radio Shack, not in business anymore, obviously. You might be able to find some kind of cans that somebody had, but that's the kind of thing. That stuff is the best, and it works fantastic on pots. So you would, if you ever wanted to use record, or if your unit, one of these units has got an amp and tone controls and volume in it, so you definitely need to spritz these controls, and you'd want to come in through. There's a gap in the controls, just one short shot each one, and then work control back, and then same thing for all kind of slide switches on here. Just if you can get in, you got to get into the body, hit it, cycle it a few times, and you're done. I didn't do it on this because I don't need to. Let's see. There's one of the power supply filter caps that's been checked. It's good to go. I didn't need to. I think. Oh yeah, Nippon Chemicon. That's who makes these. So I misspoke. Good stuff. So those caps, if you've got a Nippon Chemicon caps in there, your unit probably good to go. So here I wanted to show you what I was talking about on this. It's really hard to see in this video, but this board is the amplifier. This is the preamp for the heads, and it doesn't have much to do with the record electronics, but it's all the playback stuff is in here. There's 4 channels, and if you can see, I spent probably about 45 minutes continuously getting the flux off of this thing. I really hate that job. It really sucks, but you have to get it clean. I've had trouble with car stereo tape decks doing this. Eventually you'll run them. They'll quit working because of flux contamination. So this is not a hypothetical. It does happen. It's worse if it's in automotive because the cars are, go through temp cycles, but there's a lot of flux on here. And for them, in those cases, it was about 12 to 15 years that it starts taking effect. So it's a real effect and had to be taken care of. The construction style, those were built in the 90s. Very similar to this, really no differences. But again, you can see, if you ever look at this, you can't now, there's no flux between nodes on this thing. I mean, there might be a tiny bit here and there, but it's all gone. It's very shiny because it was, I think there might be a clear coat on here. So this board is done. And I didn't show doing it because it's just very difficult to show the process. But this board, again, this is a lot of power stuff on here with relay drivers. You can see there's flux all over this thing. I may end up hitting that one, but we'll see. But it's a similar, now that I think that these are the wiring for the heads, I'll probably need to come in here and clean this area because this is high impedance. You definitely don't want leakage on the head, so I'll probably clean here, and the rest of it's for the relays. May not care about that. To look it up on the schematic and find out what was happening, but yeah. And then so that's kind of the electronics, and we presume we're going to do a play test, and we think everything's running. We'll find out when we get there. One other thing too, this is the motor. This is the bottom bearing. 2 screws. There's a little gasket, and underneath is the bushing, and there's a thrust. Sorry, I turned it off. That's exciting. This is where there's a thrust bearing. It's a ball bearing, and there's it's a ball bearing, thrust bearing, plus the bronze bushing, and again, a couple of drops of oil. That's all you need. The bushings are in perfect shape on this. There's no grease on it. They just use light oil. That's what you need to use on these things. Never put grease on these because it'll cause the motor to drag. It'll run slow, and you'll be very unhappy because your tapes won't sound right. Let's see now. I'm going to zoom in here in a second, but look at this. Look at the deck. So this is actually a subassembly. This is the tape deck itself. I think this is nickel plated. So that's pretty crazy, right? I mean, and you can tell this part's the same way. So somebody, the Akai's had this reputation for being really high-end units, and somebody went through, did a lot of work. It's very, kind of finely crafted. There's like, who would nickel plate the deck, right? Well, they did.
Could you point out that?
Well, sure.
It's actually showing now.
This here.
Okay.
This is the nickel plate, and you can see it's shiny. Looks like chrome. I think it's nickel. It could be chrome. Same thing for this guy. It's a
Yeah.
little dirty.
That was the part.
It's either chromed or it's nickel plated. Now, I mean, it's like, wow, they went to a lot of trouble to get this stuff. You know, the quality is there. You can definitely tell on this deck. So, which I think is why he has a reputation for being one of the better ones. So I think the next thing, I'm going to pause for a second, but I want to come back and I'll show the different angle of what's going on in the track change mechanism, and that's where we really need to spend some time.
I need to ask one question. What are these components?
Okay,
what are these components?
I think those are balance pots, if I'm not mistaken. They're 10 turns. So I think,
I see.
Not that I have a service manual for this, but I think that they set the relative levels, because I don't think the heads were the same.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah, they tweak them, and then there's heads for recording on this side. Some of the record electronics is split up over on this board.
And there's pots over there.
There's pots. Yeah, I got a schematic, but the
I was
problem
just
is and the problem is I don't have a service manual, which I suppose if you thought about it long enough, you could probably come up with some way of, assuming you had a quad test tape, that you could use a scope and set everything, the tracking and the levels. But I'm not going to get into that. That is insane, and there's probably some 90-year-old Japanese guy who could tell you how to do it, but I certainly can't.